Welcome to the Financial Puzzle Piece Playbook with your host, Jim Sumpter. I'm Patrice Sikora, and I've been checking out Jim's puzzle pieces: cash flow, investments, taxes, insurance, retirement planning, and estate planning. And I'm liking this puzzle's possibilities, Jim, so I want to know, what piece or pieces are we playing with today?
Yeah, Patrice, first of all, great to be here. And so today we're going to touch on four pieces. We're going to touch on cash flow, potentially taxes, potentially estate, and potentially retirement, because what we're going to talk about is a discussion around a real estate contract. And what does that look like? What are the aspects of a contract? What does that mean? And I have with me today a very dear friend of mine, Todd Tucker, with Arc Realty in Birmingham. And in disclosure, Todd has helped me buy and sell, I don't know, 4 or 5 houses, something like that now. So we have done this real estate contract a time or two. We may get into some stories about some of that, because some of them were not as simple as you would think. But Todd, welcome.
Thank you.
And if you'll start off, maybe give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. So Todd Tucker, Arc Realty, been in the real estate business for 20 years. It's amazing because I'm only 32.
Yeah, that works.
It's pretty amazing.
Exactly.
But I've done all kinds of things with resale and also new construction. I'm a new construction specialist in addition to my resale business.
Okay.
I've also got my own staging company.
Okay.
So kind of a jack of all trades, and been doing this for quite a while.
But all in real estate.
All in real estate.
Okay, well, great. And is this individual residential real estate or commercial, or what
residential?
Residential. Okay.
Yeah, I like to specialize and stay with that.
Well, good. So what we'll talk about today is really that residential contract. Yeah. So you're getting ready to buy a house, buy a condo, buy a townhome, something like that. That's what we're going to focus on. Perfect. So let's say, so, we talked about in one of our previous episodes about mortgages and about being pre-approved, and then you get ready to go for a look for a house. Okay. So let's say you're pre-approved.
Perfect.
We're getting ready to look for a house.
Absolutely.
But we don't have a realtor. How would someone go about finding a realtor? What are some different ways?
Sure. There are many different ways. I'll be honest with you, Jim. I feel like 90% of the buyers or sellers that we work with are truly referrals.
Okay.
Referrals from friends, colleagues, business, just family members.
Okay.
But I would say most come from referrals. Working on site as a new home salesperson, we'll meet lots of people. So sometimes that is an avenue. And then when we go to list or sell a property, it's still mostly referrals, but we'll farm communities. And a lot of times farming those communities is what kind of provides us with that connection with a new seller.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, so let's start with the buyer. Okay. So my wife and I are buyers, and we not today. And we come to you and we want to use your services as a realtor. Okay. So one of the first things we need to do is figure out, where are we looking? What type of house are we looking at? Talk to me about some of the things that maybe you as a realtor would recommend we look for, like area and school zone. And that, how does that conversation start?
It's a very natural conversation, Jim, to be honest with you, because most buyers, there's a formula that just doesn't change. Obviously the budget's got to be right.
Okay.
So, and I'll tell you this, when people think about shopping for a home, they usually like to shop in a range of price points. I'm just going to round this off for us. So let's just say from 500 to 550. And that's actually very important to know, not only for the buyer, but for somebody that's looking to sell their home, simply because if you understand how a buyer will look for a property, you can be a little smarter on the selling aspect, because if you know that a buyer is going to look from 500 to 550, if you price your house at 500, you're going to capture buyers looking 450 to 500 and 500 to 550. If you price it at $499.99, you're going to miss that buyer that's going from that 500 to 550, for example.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned a range that was not a real broad range. No. It's more of a tight range.
A little tighter.
And so if you're a buyer and I'm looking and I get on one of the websites where I can see different properties and stuff, it's going to give me those in that range.
Perfect.
Am I going to be able to sort by school zone, by area? Because I don't want to live an hour from where I work.
Beautiful segue. Beautiful segue. So the first thing that's got to happen is it's got to be in the right budget.
Okay.
Because obviously, if it's not in the right budget, you're not going to consider it.
Right.
Second criteria, it's interesting, but it's always location.
Okay.
The area of the city. So, for example, we're in the greater Birmingham area. Some folks may want to focus for whatever reason, job, school, whatnot, family, let's just say in Hoover. So they're going to have their budget in mind. So when they go to technology's changed everything about how people purchase.
Right.
In the past, realtors were really instrumental in helping connect buyers and sellers because we didn't have that level of technology. Well, technology's changed everything.
Okay.
So they're gonna want to shop by price point first, then by location. School system will come into play if you have kids, but you'd be so surprised. Like we have a lot of empty nester downsizers who their kids are grown and gone, but they're still interested in school system because they know the value that certain school systems can play into that property.
Okay, so let's go down that rabbit hole
Sure.
just a second. Now, obviously, I live in Birmingham. We've bought and sold. We know each other.
Sure.
Let's say I'm moving from out of state.
Yeah.
And I don't know you,
Yeah.
but I want to use your services as a realtor. I don't know that much about Birmingham.
Right.
Is that something that you would come into play and kind of help us to understand the different areas of the town and
Absolutely.
the city? Okay.
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, that's one of the most paramount things that as a realtor, we can provide to someone that's relocating, coming in from out of the area. They don't know the area.
Okay.
And we have to be as universal as we can be.
Mhm.
We don't want to steer any buyer into a certain direction. So our main job is just to provide as much information and education on the different areas, what the convenience factors are. We'll pay attention to where their work situation may be or family members. But yeah, that's a great point.
Okay.
That's a great point.
Great. So I know there's a lot of, because if it's on the internet, it's true. So
Of course.
of course,
The internet does not lie.
Exactly. So Zillow is a very common place.
Sure.
The pricing on that particular site versus some of the others are sometimes very different.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that? Because someone says, okay, and this is also kind of getting into the seller, because which we're going to segue to, because I get these emails all the time from Zillow, I think weekly, that tells me what my house is worth this week.
Right.
Is that really an accurate number?
I hate to say this, it's not.
Okay.
And I'll start by saying Zillow is probably the number one search engine that buyers will use. It's just it's become it's almost like Kleenex.
Okay.
Kleenex is the brand name for a tissue.
Right.
And Zillow's almost become the brand name for the search engine that people will use.
Interesting.
To find a new property.
Okay.
But what I love to share, and thank you for asking that, is Zillow used to do what's called a Zestimate, and they still do it. I don't know if they still refer to it as a Zestimate, but they try to tell you what the value of your home is. That is actually an algorithm, and it looks at a lot of general factors that go into it. So it's not really normally going to be dramatically off, but unless it's new construction, people who are selling a resale home. And when you're selling a resale home, that algorithm's not going to take into account any additions you've done, updates you've done, cosmetic or structural. And therefore, it's really not providing a true depiction for everybody. Also, you've got some communities, neighborhoods, where you can have community A right next to community B. And community A's values may be much higher for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to understand that, because the algorithm's just kind of pulling from a certain radius.
Okay.
So
got it.
It's a good guide.
Okay.
But I would never say it's a solid figure.
So we can use that as a guideline.
I'd say it's a guideline.
Okay. So let's move on to the seller real quick.
Sure.
So now you're representing me as a seller.
Perfect. I'm loving this.
Yeah, you're loving this. Okay. This is also not going to happen.
Oh my
but go
gosh.
ahead.
Come
okay.
on, Jim.
Okay. So we've decided that we want to sell.
Okay.
Zillow says our house is worth X. Mm-hmm. And we come to you and say, Todd, we want to sell. Okay. What is your process as a realtor to help us come up with a price?
Love it.
Yeah.
So there's two key ingredients that go into any transaction that you're going to sell your property. You absolutely want to pay attention to the proper price, and we can dig deeper into that.
Right.
What does that mean? What does that look like? How do we establish that? And then also the presentation. And the presentation is something that, unless you are really a seasoned realtor, full-time doing this, you may not really understand the true impact. But because of technology and because of how buyers are shopping off of the internet, that is the first time that they're going to look at the property. and they're going to
Okay.
use that as their determining factor. Do they want to see the home or do they not want to see the home? So buyers are making big decisions off of photos,
Oh,
photos
okay.
of your house.
Wow.
So you want to make sure you're having professional photography taken. You want to make sure that you're using a realtor that either they have the eye to look at the space and tell you what updates or changes may be needed to help get that top dollar, or they have a connection who they can bring in if they don't have that eye for that talent.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's part of your job because
I think that's become paramount.
Right.
Yeah,
So
you have to.
and is that something that all realtors do it that way, or is it different? So if I'm a seller and let's say I don't know a realtor, and I'm getting ready to sell a house, do you feel like it's a best practice for us to interview different realtors? And what type questions would we want to ask them to make sure that we get the best value for our house?
Well, I definitely think that you should talk to more than one person.
Okay.
And you should ask questions about, what is their pricing strategy? How do they come up with their numbers? Just ask a lot of probing questions. I would absolutely find out, do they use professional photography or do they take pictures with their iPhone?
Oh, okay.
Because it is going to impact how a buyer feels about a property.
Okay.
Ask them how long they've been in the business. If you've got somebody that's, just gotten into it and they're doing it on a part-time basis, I wish them the best, but I would never tell my best friend to say, hey, use this brand new person. I would say, look for a seasoned professional that knows what they're doing. And the reason is for most people, their personal home, their real estate is one of their highest and best investments.
Right.
So would you trust, if you need heart surgery, would you go to somebody that just got their physician license and they've done it, one time on who knows, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So somebody with some experience.
Look for experience, ask probing questions, ask, what is their pricing strategy? How do they come up with it? I say pricing strategy.
What do you mean by pricing strategy? Let's walk through that just a second.
Thank you for asking. So my team, my brokerage, we try to look at it from 3 different ways when we're meeting with our sellers. And we can either overprice a house.
Okay.
Which buyers, when they're looking on the internet, they're getting a lot of information, a lot of education. If you were to overprice a house and it's like that on the internet, do you think that a buyer is going to know that it's overpriced?
Mm-hmm.
I do too.
Yeah.
So number one, don't overprice your house.
Okay.
You can price the house and buyers are going to understand that. And you can underprice it. And when I say underprice to a seller, a lot of times the seller they'll tighten up or stiffen up because nobody wants to hear it. Everybody wants what?
The highest price.
Top dollar.
Everybody wants their cake and eat it too.
Of course,
exactly.
Of course.
Yeah.
I would be the same way.
Yeah, sure.
So to get top dollar, sometimes depending on the market, depending on the sub-market, like the subdivision, I'll give you a great example. In the greater Birmingham area, we have different communities, Hoover, Homewood, Vestavia, Mountain Brook, all kinds. Homewood is a smaller community, high desirability. Its price per square foot is out of the roof. Mm-hmm. So it's a market that just is always in high demand. So when you got something like that, if you slightly underprice, here's the best way I can say this to articulate it. So if you love Hershey candy bar, and a Hershey candy bar normally costs $1, and you know that you can get that Hershey candy bar for 50 cents, mm-hmm. buyers are going to be all over that. And if they show up on that first day and there's a crowd of other people trying to get in and clamor to get it, they're going to fight. And that's where you actually will see people going into bidding wars. Mm-hmm. And we can talk more about that. But sometimes the right strategy, depending on the market, might be to slightly underprice.
Okay.
And we're really careful. We give everybody all the options and let the seller decide. Mm-hmm. But 9 times out of 10, they're either going to want to right price it, or in the right market, they're going to want to underprice it because they know they're going to get even more.
Okay. So price is extremely important. Yeah. How you price is extremely important. Yeah. Let's move on to we now have a contract.
Beautiful.
Okay. So we've settled on price. That's always the first thing. Right. But is that the only part of a contract?
No, I wish it were. And I'll say it like this. In some markets, sometimes, price is paramount and price is the only factor in play. But for most of us, most of the time, price is going to be important. But then the other factors that play into it are inspections.
Okay.
Contingencies.
Okay.
Contingent on the home inspection, contingent on financing, and outside of just the home inspection, there's additional inspections.
Okay, so
termite. Yeah,
I'm gonna stop you.
Sorry.
No, I'm gonna stop you just a second because
Yeah.
I want to get into this home inspection
Yeah.
thing. Is that the same as an appraisal, first of all?
Okay.
And what does a home inspection mean? And when the home inspector comes in and inspects, are they working for the buyer or are they working for the seller?
Okay.
How does that work?
All right. Well, first part of that is a home inspection and an appraisal the same thing? No.
They're not. Okay,
They're
so we're
not.
going to get
They're
into
not.
that
Yeah,
in just
so
a second then. Okay.
We'll parking lot appraisal for now.
Okay.
So home inspection actually will work for the person that's paying them. And 9 times out of 10, the person paying them, and as a buyer, you'd want it to be you as the buyer paying them,
Right.
because you want them to work for you,
Okay.
not the seller.
Right.
Seller might call Uncle Bob.
Right.
So anyway, a buyer would pay the home inspector. Price tag on that's around $500, give or
Okay.
take.
Okay.
Or take. But just to mentally think about that, a home inspection, you want that home inspector to have all the proper tools and technology to do things to not only inspect inside the house, but nowadays inspectors have drones that can go up and look at the roof systems and take photographs for you. It's beautiful. A home inspector will put together a report that's about 40 or 50 pages long. So
Wow.
It's pretty in depth.
Okay.
It's important for a good realtor to explain to the buyer that a home inspector, their sole purpose is to give you a full inspection as to what the condition is of the home that you're buying.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a list to give to the seller and say, I want a perfect house. I want a new house. A good realtor is going to communicate that with the buyer so that the buyer goes into it with open eyes and they understand, okay, so the purpose of this person is to tell me the condition. It's not to create my wish list to hand over to the seller. Now, certainly if there's any health and safety issues, if there's structural issues, if there's something that's just really sticking out to the buyer that's a point of contention, yeah, see if the seller will work with you on that. An additional inspection outside of that home inspection would be termite.
Okay.
So once you're past that home inspection point of view, we want to do additional inspections, termite inspection, sewer inspection. If you're buying a house in an older area that has a lot of trees, a lot of hills, and the home has age on it, that those root systems where the trees are, they can compromise those pipes. And the current homeowner may have no knowledge of any type of sewer or water issue, but it might exist and happening underground. So a sewer inspection is one thing that a lot of times people don't think about, but it's really important, especially in some of those pocketed areas where the house has age on it and you've got some bigger trees with larger root systems.
So you mentioned older homes because I know they're out there obviously,
yeah.
and people buy and sell them every day.
Sure.
You bring about a good point with the older home because things could happen that you're not aware of. Okay.
Right.
Maybe when that home was built, let's say the house was built in the 50s or 60s, it was built to code in the 50s or 60s.
Perfect.
But in 2024,
Codes
it may not be the same code.
Right.
Is an inspector going to point out those things?
Yes.
And then what happens from there?
Thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
Great point. So an inspector needs to call those things out because what they want to do is they want to educate the person buying the home. This is the condition of your house. And oh, by the way, codes have changed.
Okay.
That knob system of electricity that was used when this home was built in the 50s is no longer to today's code. Now, we can't really hold a seller to today's code, but we want to educate the buyer as to what is and what isn't. And it's important because there's probably things that we weren't aware of in the 50s that we're aware of now, which is why codes have changed. We don't have to hold the seller accountable,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not their fault.
Right.
It's not a brand new home.
Right.
But we do need to educate the buyer. This is the condition of the home. This is the codes, and you may want to look into this. Yeah.
So, okay. So we have the price, we have the inspections.
Perfect.
Sometimes you want to be able to get out of a contract if
Yeah.
things aren't exactly as they appear in the beginning.
Absolutely.
Is an inspection one of those items that can allow a buyer to get out of the contract if those sorts of things aren't repaired or fixed or moved up to code and things like? Is that one of the purposes of that?
So I'll say it like this. That's one of the purposes of having a good realtor.
Okay.
All contracts can have a little degree of difference
Right.
to them. Most contracts call out that if you are having a home inspection that the purchase is contingent on that home inspection.
Okay.
And basically that word contingency is giving the buyer their out. Some contracts are written where you have to at least give the seller an opportunity to correct or fix, things that may not be to code or things that, are of discrepancy, and at least give the seller an opportunity. And if the seller says, yes, I'll do that, even if it's $50,000 to fix it, the way the contract's written, then the buyer could be bound to that. So that's why using a great realtor that can help you understand how is it written and what does that mean.
Okay.
It's a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's jump to appraisal.
Sure.
Real quick.
Yep.
What is an appraisal and how is that different than an inspection? And what does that mean for
Great.
the buyer and seller?
Yep. And the funny thing is this happens almost every transaction. So an appraisal really has its most importance when there's a loan involved, because unless you're putting a significant amount down, the lender is going to need some type of insurance that if the loan were defaulted on, that the value's there.
Okay.
If they needed to resell it at a discounted rate.
Okay.
So the only way that they can do that is to get a true market value by getting an appraisal.
Okay.
So most appraisals, while they're paid for by the buyer, they truly impact the whole transaction, the seller, everything.
Wow.
Because if both parties agree to a certain price, and if there is an appraisal that takes place, most contracts read that the seller and the buyer can negotiate to adjust the price of the home to be equal to that of the appraisal, or to be out of the contract. And times where market conditions are such that people are just fighting hand over fist to get a property, I have actually seen buyers write, I will cover the difference between an appraised value and the contract amount up to X. And that's fine.
Right.
So,
right.
Because sometimes, market conditions are such that buyers are just fighting to get a property and they don't want to lose.
Right.
So they'll do those extra effort things to make it happen.
Well, good. All right. Let me ask you, this is the last part of the contract part. What about a home warranty? Is that a good thing, a bad thing? Does it kind of depend?
It kind of depends.
Okay.
Again, I go back to, a great realtor is going to educate the buyer. What does a home warranty really mean? How do home warranties really work? How much does it cost me or does it cost the seller? Because in normal times, I'll say it like that. In normal times, buyers would be asking sellers to provide a home warranty, but we want some level of comfort that if I move in, X goes wrong, X will be taken care of. What buyers need to understand is the way a home warranty works is a lot of times there is a supplemental fee. So maybe it's a $50 fee. It's like paying for the person to come out and look at the item. But 9 times out of 10, warranty companies want to repair, Band-Aid a broken system versus replace a system.
Okay.
And sometimes that repair or Band-Aid can become a cyclical thing where it just continues to happen and happen and happen.
So if I've had a home inspection and the inspector has gone through literally everything, given me my 40-page book on my house that I'm buying, and I'm going to at least know in general the condition of the various pieces of the house, the appliances and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Okay. So that's our contract. If I have a contract and everything goes smooth, then we move to closing. Have you ever had a situation where that didn't happen?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've had contracts fall through. Now, Todd and I are laughing here because we were joking. The first house that you ever sold for Jennifer and I think we had 4 contracts before it finally went. Yeah. And so what I wanted to point out is that just because you have a contract day one does not mean 100% of the time that it will go to closing. And I'll give one quick example of something that I remember. This was not the first house. This was another house that we were buying. We had a contract on the house subject to inspection.
Perfect.
The inspection came back with a tremendous amount of repairs that needed to be done to the windows.
Things that we just weren't even aware of.
We were totally unaware.
We had that.
This particular house had a lot of windows, and it was going to be a lot of money to totally repair the windows. We offered and provided the inspection report to the seller we offered X number of dollars as a, hey, we'll take care of that. We weren't asking them to replace everything or put a Band-Aid on everything. Right. What we were saying was, look, this is going to cost us X. Right. We'll offer you Y. They refused that. And so that gave us an opportunity to say, no, thank you.
Right. It wasn't the right property.
It wasn't the right property. Yeah. Even though we had a contract in the beginning, right, that was an out. Perfect. That we had the opportunity for. And you as a realtor explained all of our options, and we went and were able to find another home that worked, and it was wonderful for us. And it's actually where we live today. Yeah. And so, that's what I wanted to point out, is just because you have a contract day one does not mean necessarily that it's going to go to close. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. And then we've had some interesting transactions in ours. That's why we're done. That's why I said we're not doing this again. Todd, any final comments or thoughts?
It's real estate is so interesting. And it's so much fun. Great job though, going through all of this. Yeah.
Well, that's what I wanted to point out. This is, and I'm going to do a follow-up in my next podcast with a different person that's also a realtor. Mm-hmm. We're going to kind of get into a little bit more of the staging and the getting ready to sell and things like that. That'll be a good one. Yep. This, I wanted to hit the highlights. Sure. And so Patrice, I think that's what we wanted to cover today.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, gentlemen, I could have listened to you for another hour or so.
Okay. Good. We've got another hour.
All right, let's do this.
That was great stuff. So much. But Jim, before we go, how can people reach Todd if they want it?
Todd, how can people reach you? Because you said, I imagine your phone is a pretty good way to do it.
Absolutely. So the funny thing is, my phone number 205-999 TODD, which spells 8633. So 205-999 Todd.
Todd.
Yeah, there you go. Call me, text me, love to help.
Okay.
And Jim, how can listeners reach you?
Yeah, with CMC Financial, it's 205-510-9074 is my direct phone number. jsumpter@cmcfp.com, or you can just go to our website, cmcfp.com. We're also on all the socials. This podcast will be provided to all of those, including YouTube, which we now have. So we're getting into the next century there. So, Patrice, thank you for the time. Thank you for setting this up for us. Todd, thank you for doing this. It's always a lot of fun.
All right, listeners, put your puzzle pieces together in a financial plan that works for you. Be sure to follow this podcast, share it with others, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Puzzle Playbook. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Don't forget to follow us on social media by checking the links in the description. And contact us today by visiting our website at www.cmcfp.com or give us a call at 205-510-9074. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security, or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of CMC Financial. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, Private Client Services, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by CMC Financial or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, CMC Financial, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.